Gavin never expected to meet someone like Lila the night he showed up to that noisy Halloween rooftop party. He wasn't even supposed to be there. His friend dragged him along after a long day at the clinic, dressed half-heartedly as Sherlock Holmes with a wrinkled trench coat and a plastic pipe. Gavin leaned against the railing, sipping a lukewarm beer, watching the skyline in silence. That's when she walked up. Lila, confident, magnetic, dressed as Cleopatra with a gold headband and a glass of wine she held like it belonged in her hand. "You look like you lost a bet," she teased, eyeing his costume. Gavin smiled. "I did. I lost to the friend who made me come here." She laughed, and the ice broke. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing. She joked that his job sounded boring until he explained how he helped stroke patients learn to walk again. Her eyes softened. That actually sounds important. In that moment, something shifted. Gavin felt seen, not as a walking resume, not as a fixer, but as a man. It was unexpected, gentle, real. He'd come to the party planning to leave early, but somehow by midnight, he was hoping the night would never end. From the beginning, Gavin and Lila lived in different worlds, but love, or what felt like it, blurred the lines. Gavin was methodical, grounded by years of clawing his way out of debt and chasing stability like it was oxygen. Lila, on the other hand, thrived on spontaneity and appearances. She had charm in spades, but money slipped through her fingers like sand. Still, Gavin believed he could build something solid with her. He helped her refinance her loans, showed her how compound interest worked, even set up a joint savings account. Lila played along, nodding through his budgeting lessons, but her heart wasn't in it. She rolled her eyes at his spreadsheets and scoffed when he suggested cooking in instead of dining out. "You track dinner like it's a stock portfolio," she joked once, and though he smiled, it stung. Gavin didn't want luxury. He wanted security. She wanted the rush of indulgence, not the comfort of a plan. And slowly, the weight of compromise settled onto his shoulders alone. Behind every decision, Gavin felt the pull of unspoken imbalance. He was building a future, brick by careful brick, while Lila danced on the roof, admiring the view, never asking how the walls stayed standing. Julian arrived like a sudden cold front, uninvited, unexpected, and impossible to ignore. He was Lila's old business school friend, the kind she mentioned in passing, always with a light laugh and vague anecdotes. So when he announced he was relocating to their city for work, Gavin raised an eyebrow. Julian was the type who wore designer loafers with no socks and called it a brand. His job, conveniently remote, could have been done from anywhere, yet he chose here. Lila acted like it was fate. "Isn't it great?" she beamed, scrolling through apartment listings for him on the couch. At first, Gavin tried to be gracious. He even helped Julian find a realtor, connected him with a few local professionals, and hosted him for dinner. But soon the tone shifted. Julian was suddenly a fixture, at their table, in their plans, and worst of all, in Lila's every notification. Texts buzzed constantly. Inside jokes, Gavin wasn't part of bloomed like vines, wrapping around their marriage, suffocating the quiet spaces. What started as polite tolerance became a slow-burning discomfort. And Gavin, once the center of Lila's world, began to feel like a guest in his own life. Always present, yet increasingly peripheral. Their anniversary was supposed to be a pause button, a quiet weekend tucked away in a mountain cabin Gavin had carefully planned months in advance. He'd made dinner reservations, packed her favorite wine, and even found a local trail with a view he knew she'd love. But 2 hours before they were supposed to leave, Lila stood in the kitchen, her phone pressed to her ear, eyes wide with fake concern. "Julian's having a rough day," she said, grabbing her coat. "I promised I'd be there for him." Gavin blinked, unsure if he'd heard her right. "It's our anniversary," he said, voice even but heavy. I know, she replied, already halfway out the door. "He just really needs someone right now." The door clicked shut before he could say anything else. Gavin drove to the cabin alone. The air was sharp and clean, but the silence echoed. He lit the fireplace, set the table, and stared at the second chair across from him. Empty. The dinner sat untouched, and the bottle of wine never got opened. That night, surrounded by pine trees and silence, Gavin realized something terrifying. She didn't just forget the occasion. She didn't care enough to remember. It happened in the kitchen. Ordinary space, extraordinary rupture. Lila was rinsing out a wine glass, her back turned, as Gavin cautiously asked if they could spend more time together, just the two of them. "No, Julian," No third wheel. No last-minute changes. Her response came without hesitation, like she'd rehearsed it in her mind a dozen times. Maybe if you were more interesting to be around, I wouldn't need to spend so much time with him. The words didn't come out cruel. They came out casual, which somehow hurt worse. Gavin stood frozen, dish towel in hand, feeling like the floor beneath him had tilted. That single sentence cleaved something open inside him, because it wasn't a jab, it was a confession. A crack in the foundation that couldn't be patched. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. And neither did he. The silence that followed was louder than any argument they'd ever had. In that moment, while the faucet hummed and her wine glass sparkled in the light, Gavin understood. He was no longer her partner. He was a placeholder, a fixture. And the loneliness of being unwanted by someone who sleeps beside you every night settled over him like a second skin. The discovery wasn't dramatic. It came in the form of a white envelope stamped final notice. Gavin opened it at the kitchen counter, expecting junk mail. Instead, it was a collections letter tied to a credit card he didn't even know existed. The balance, $8,942.57. He logged into the account, heart pounding. The transactions told a story louder than any confession. 5-star dinners, boutique hotel stays, and a $1,200 Cartier watch labeled Julian birthday. Gavin stared at the screen. Each line item a betrayal spelled out in numbers and merchant names. She hadn't just drifted emotionally. She'd invested in Julian, literally and secretly. What stung wasn't the money. It was the deception. The knowledge that while Gavin was budgeting for their future, Lila was financing someone else's comfort behind his back. And it wasn't just reckless spending. It was a breach of trust that turned their shared finances into a battlefield. He took screenshots, created folders, cataloged every charge. Not out of spite, but out of self-defense. It was no longer just about hurt feelings. It was legal, it was strategic, and it was survival. In that moment, Gavin stopped being a husband trying to fix things and became a man preparing for war with silence as a shield. From the outside, Gavin and Lila looked like a modern power couple, ambitious, well-dressed, upwardly mobile. But beneath the curated photos and polite dinner party smiles was a quiet imbalance neither of them ever truly addressed. Gavin had built his life on structure and sacrifice, budgeting every dollar since college, working overtime to pay off his loans, and living modestly so that one day he wouldn't have to. He approached life with the careful attention of a builder laying bricks, one solid plan at a time. Lila, meanwhile, moved through life like it owed her something, quick to indulge, slow to apologize. She came into the relationship with over $60,000 in student debt and a taste for things her paycheck couldn't quite cover. Salon appointments that ran triple digits. Designer handbags she called investments, and spontaneous weekend away with her girlfriends. Gavin tried to help. He consolidated her loans, walked her through credit reports, and even set her up with a budgeting app she barely opened. "You worry too much," she'd say, waving off his spreadsheets. "Money's meant to move." She didn't understand that Gavin's obsession with saving wasn't greed. It was protection, forged in childhood scarcity. The more he tried to build a foundation for both of them, the more she seemed to dance above it, untouched by gravity. Over time, Gavin felt less like a partner and more like a safety net, always catching the fall, never thanked for the landing. It wasn't just financial incompatibility. It was the beginning of emotional erosion. It wasn't the demand itself that shook Gavin. It was how calmly she said it. "You need to apologize to Julian," Lila announced, her arms folded, her voice flat, like she was assigning a task at work. Gavin stood there stunned. Apologize? To the man who had ridiculed his profession in front of colleagues, insulted his years of training and sacrifice, and treated his home like a playground for cheap jabs? Julian had mocked his life's work with a smug smile. And yet he was the one expected to make amends. The weight of betrayal settled heavy in Gavin's chest. Not just because Lila was defending Julian, but because she didn't even pause to consider how wrong that was. "Have you even considered that he has a problem with your husband?" Gavin asked quietly, holding her gaze. She looked away. "He's just protective," she replied, avoiding the truth. Gavin exhaled, the realization sinking in like ice. "I don't need protection from dinner conversation. But maybe you need protection from honesty." That moment didn't explode, it froze. And in the silence that followed, Gavin began to emotionally detach. Her loyalty had spoken loud and clear. Not in screams, but in chilling, calculated silence. Gavin didn't expect fireworks or closure, just silence. That night, after yet another cold dinner and a colder exchange, Lila grabbed her keys and muttered, "Staying at Julian's. Don't wait up." She didn't slam the door. She didn't cry. She simply left, as if walking out of a conversation that had long stopped matching. Gavin stood in the hallway, staring at the door for a moment, not with heartbreak, but with eerie calm. The line had been crossed, again, and this time there was no coming back. The next morning, he called his lawyer. "It's time," he said. No emotion, just certainty. Over the next 2 days, Gavin moved swiftly. Personal belongings went into storage. Bank accounts were separated, joint credit cards closed. He left exactly half in the joint account, down to the penny. There was no vengeance, only balance. He changed beneficiaries, forwarded his mail, and ensured every document was cleanly divided. By the time Lila returned days later, he was waiting at the kitchen table, folders neatly arranged. Divorce papers slid across the wood like a final play in a game she never realized they were playing. She blinked, stunned. "You're serious?" she whispered. Gavin nodded. "You made your choice the night you walked out. I'm just formalizing it." She sat down, hands trembling. "What am I supposed to do now?" she asked. Gavin looked her dead in the eyes and said, "Play your own game. I'm not your safety net anymore." The silence that followed was louder than any goodbye. Lila showed up at the clinic unannounced. Her energy frantic, her eyes scanning every face in the waiting room until they landed on Lauren. Gavin watched from behind the glass of his office door, expression unreadable. Lauren, ever composed, stepped between Lila and the hallway, shielding the space like a quiet fortress. Voices rose, tension buzzed in the air, but Gavin didn't flinch. He finished his patient consult, then calmly walked into the front office where Lila waited, arms stiff, eyes flashing. Without a word, she slid the signed divorce papers across his desk. "You win," she muttered, avoiding eye contact. Gavin didn't smile. "This was never about winning," he said evenly. "It's about consequences." Her shoulders sagged as she finally confessed what he already knew. Julian had left. No goodbye, just a text and a forwarding address. Gavin didn't gloat. He didn't offer comfort. Instead, he gave her the one thing she never gave him, truth. "He never loved you," he said quietly. "He loved the attention you gave him." Lila's eyes welled up, but Gavin didn't waver. "You may have loved me," he added, "but you never respected me. And without that, love's just noise." Then he stood, and she left alone. In today's world, where emotional distractions and surface-level connections are everywhere, Gavin's story is a reminder to protect your peace, your purpose, and your self-worth. Love without respect is just noise. It may sound sweet for a while, but eventually it drowns out your value. If someone consistently makes you feel like a second choice, believe them. Pay attention to actions, not apologies. Set boundaries early, communicate clearly, and don't be afraid to walk away from what diminishes you. In both relationships and finances, clarity isn't cruelty, it's survival. Choose people who build with you, not those who drain you.